In the quiet village of Omufe, where mist rolled low over the hills and elders told stories by flickering firelight, a young man named Kola became the talk of the town, not for wisdom or bravery, but for arrogance. Kola was known for mocking the traditions that his people held sacred. When others poured libations to their ancestors, he laughed and called it superstition. He was strong, handsome, and reckless, the kind of man who believed nothing could harm him. One evening, as the men of the village gathered by the palm wine tapper's hut, someone mentioned the story of old Mama Aduna's grave. She had been a powerful midwife and healer, feared even after her death. It was said that anyone who disrespected her resting place would be cursed with madness. But Kola, drunk and defiant, slammed his calabash of wine on the ground and shouted, "You old men and your ghost tales! There is no spirit that can harm me. I will prove it tonight." The crowd gasped. Even his closest friends begged him to stop, warning him that the dead must never be mocked. But Kola only laughed louder, snatched a lantern, and stumbled toward the dark forest where Mama Aduna's grave lay beneath a twisted baobab tree. The moon hung like a pale coin in the sky, and crickets fell silent as he approached the mound of earth surrounded by white stones. The air was heavy, carrying the scent of old incense and something else, something like sorrow. He stood over the grave, swaying slightly, and sneered, "Let's see if your ghost can touch me, old woman." Then, in his drunken pride, he loosened his trousers and urinated on the grave. The ground seemed to shiver. The air turned cold. His lantern flickered once, twice, then went out completely. Kola laughed nervously, trying to relight it, but his fingers felt numb. Suddenly, he heard a whisper behind him, soft, old, and broken. "You have no respect." His body froze. The hair on his neck stood up. When he turned, there was nothing but darkness until two faint lights appeared in the trees, like eyes. The wind picked up, swirling leaves and dust around him. The smell of decay filled his nostrils. His heart pounded. He dropped the lantern and ran, stumbling through roots and branches, but the whisper followed, closer, clearer. "You will learn. Respect." He burst out of the forest, gasping and drenched in sweat. The villagers saw him fall to his knees, trembling. When they reached him, his eyes were wide with terror, and he could not speak a word. From that night on, Kola changed. He stopped laughing, stopped drinking, and refused to go out after dark. People whispered that he had seen Mama Aduna's ghost, that she had marked him. He would often be found staring at nothing, muttering to himself, "I said sorry. I said sorry." But the wind seemed to answer him with a sigh. Days passed after that dreadful night, but Kola was no longer the same man who once boasted loudly and laughed at the elders' warnings. He awoke each morning drenched in sweat, haunted by dreams he could not escape, dreams of cold hands reaching from beneath the soil, of eyes watching him from behind the trees. His mother, Mama Kemi, prayed endlessly for her son, bringing herbs and holy water to cleanse his spirit, but Kola grew weaker. His once proud voice, now trembling like a child's. He stopped eating, stopped speaking, and his friends said they heard him whispering to the air, as though speaking to someone no one else could see. "Please," he would mutter, "I didn't mean to. Forgive me." At first, the villagers pitied him, but soon they began to fear him. Strange things started happening around his hut. Animals refused to go near. The air felt cold, even at noon and at night. A faint woman's voice was heard humming an ancient lullaby outside his window. The elders called a diviner from a neighboring village, a man named Baba Oren, known for speaking to spirits. When Baba Oren arrived, he entered Kola's hut and lit a calabash filled with burning herbs. The smoke rose in spirals, filling the air with the smell of bitter roots. "The spirit you mocked is not at rest," Baba Oren said solemnly. "You disturbed her eternal sleep, and now she walks between worlds, tethered to your shadow." Kola shivered, his voice hoarse. "What must I do? I only made a mistake." The diviner looked deep into the bowl of burning ash and said, "Mistake or not, disrespect of the dead is never forgiven easily. You must return to her grave, take offerings of palm oil, white cloth, and cowries, and beg for her mercy before the next full moon. If you delay, she will claim your life." But Kola, terrified of returning to that forest, refused. That night he heard her again. The lullaby turned into a whisper. The whisper turned into words. "You touched my rest. Now you will know mine." The room grew cold. His mat lifted slightly from the ground, and when he looked to the corner, he saw Haran, old woman with hollow eyes, her face pale as ash, her feet hovering above the floor. He screamed. But his mother rushed in to find him alone, shaking violently, his skin clammy as though he'd been dragged through water. By morning, Kola had fallen ill. His veins darkened, his eyes rolled back, and no healer's medicine worked. Word spread quickly that Mama Aduna's ghost had cursed him. The villagers avoided his hut. Even the children crossed the road when passing by. Only his mother remained, praying and weeping beside his bed. But deep inside, Kola knew the truth. The spirit would not stop until he went back to where it all began. On the third night, he saw her again, standing by the window, her lips not moving, but her voice echoing in his head. "Come to me, and I will let you rest." With trembling hands, he rose from his mat and stumbled out into the dark, drawn once again toward the forest and the grave that had sealed his fate. The night Kola left his hut, the air was unnaturally still. Not even the crickets dared to sing. He walked barefoot through the narrow path leading to the forest, guided by the faint whisper of the spirit that called him. Each step felt heavier than the last, his heart pounding like a drum in his chest. The moon hid behind the clouds, and only the dim light of his trembling lantern kept him company. Behind him, his mother's voice echoed faintly, calling his name, but the forest seemed to swallow her words whole. When Kola reached the baobab tree, the same place where he had committed his unforgivable act, the air turned thick with mist, swirling around his legs like cold fingers. The grave before him looked freshly disturbed, though no one had dared to come here since that cursed night. His mouth went dry. He knelt slowly, placing before the mound the white cloth, the palm oil, and the cowries the diviner had instructed him to bring. "I have come to beg," he whispered, his voice shaking. "Forgive me, Mama Aduni. I was foolish, proud, and blind. Please, let me go." For a moment, the forest was silent. Then a sudden gust of wind blew out his lantern. The darkness that followed was so deep, it felt alive. He could hear something moving around him, footsteps crunching in the leaves, though he could see nothing. Then came the voice, low-aged and filled with pain. "You disturbed the peace of one who healed this land. You mocked the earth that feeds you. Tell me, Kola, why should you live while others rest? He fell to his knees, sobbing. I am sorry. I am sorry, he cried, pressing his forehead to the soil. But the ground beneath him grew cold, and from the corner of his eye he saw a pale hand push through the earth. He screamed, stumbling backward, but the hand caught his anklet's grip, icy and unrelenting. You cannot wash away what you have done, the voice hissed, but you can serve. Suddenly, the forest seemed to awaken, trees groaning, owls screeching, the air vibrating with unseen energy. Kola's body stiffened as something like smoke entered his chest. He gasped, clutching his heart, and then everything went dark. When dawn came, the villagers found him lying beside the grave, his skin pale, his eyes open but blank. They thought he was dead until he blinked slowly, his lips murmuring words no one could understand. He was carried back to the village, but he no longer spoke like Kola. His voice had changed, old and trembling, and when the elders asked who he was, he replied in a tone that made their blood run cold. I am the keeper of this land now. The dead must be respected. From that day forward, Kola walked differently, his eyes distant, his speech calm yet unsettling. He tended to the graves of the forgotten, cleaned the burial grounds, and cursed anyone who dared disturb the dead. Some said Mama Aduna's spirit had taken root in him, turning him into her servant, a guardian between the living and the dead. Others whispered that Kola had died that night, and what returned was not entirely human. But no one dared question him directly. When people passed the graveyard, they would see him standing silently beneath the baobab tree, whispering prayers to the wind as if speaking to someone unseen. Weeks turned into months, and the once proud and boastful Kola was now a shadow of his former self. Though the villagers no longer called him by that name, they whispered another title whenever he passed through the market with his wooden staff and distant stare, the keeper of the forgotten. His eyes were hollow yet deep, reflecting an unseen world, and though his lips rarely moved, strange things began to happen in Omuef. Graves that had been abandoned for years suddenly bloomed with white lilies overnight, and lost spirits that had haunted families for generations seemed to fade into peace. The elders were torn between fear and reverence. Some said Kola had been chosen by Mama Aduni to continue her work, while others insisted he was cursed, a living vessel of the restless dead. Children followed him from a distance, throwing stones to test if he was still human. But when one boy's stone struck his shoulder, the boy screamed and ran home as his arm went numb. That night, the boy's mother rushed to the keeper's hut with food and palm wine, begging for forgiveness. Kola looked up from his mat, his expression empty, and simply said, "The spirits do not forget disrespect." Then he turned away, humming a lullaby that chilled her to the bone, the same one Mama Aduni had sung to newborns before her death. Slowly, the villagers began bringing offerings to him, eggs, white cloth, yam, and coins, asking him to bless their homes or cleanse their sick. His touch was cold but healing, and those who ignored his presence often found their nights filled with nightmares of the graveyard, where Mama Aduna's ghost stood beside a weeping man who looked like Kola. Yet, though his power grew, inside him a battle raged. Sometimes, in the stillness of night, he could hear his own voice screaming within his head. fighting to be free of the spirit that bound him. "Let me go," he would cry, clutching his chest. But another voice would answer, calm and ancient, "You brought me forth. Now, you are my vessel." Kola tried everything to resist, bathing in river herbs, fasting, praying, even calling upon Baba Orin again, but the diviner refused to help. "Some bindings cannot be undone," the old man said. "You are now a bridge between two realms. If you try to separate, both will perish." Kola wept, realizing that his punishment was not death, but life in servitude to the dead. Over time, he accepted his fate. He cleaned the graveyards daily, leaving flowers for the forgotten, whispering names of those no one remembered. The villagers soon realized that storms never struck Omuife anymore, and crops grew greener than ever before. The elders began to speak of him not as cursed, but chosen, a guardian who had restored balance between life and death. Yet there were nights when Kola sat beneath the baobab tree and tears streamed silently down his face. For he knew the truth. Mama Aduni had forgiven the land, but not him. Her spirit rested now, but his own never would. His laughter had turned into the wind that sighed through the trees, his freedom traded for peace that others could enjoy. Still, deep in the shadows, a part of him wondered if someday another fool would mock the dead, and whether, when that happened, his spirit too would rise to teach the same lesson that had once destroyed him. Years slipped quietly through the sands of Omuef, and the tale of Koloth, the man who had urinated on the grave and lived to tell no one, became both a warning and a wonder passed from one generation to the next. The children who once threw stones at him grew into elders who spoke his story beside the fire, their eyes reflecting both fear and awe. No one remembered exactly when Kola stopped aging. His hair turned white, his skin wrinkled like old bark, yet his body did not weaken. He still walked every morning through the mist-covered paths to the burial grounds, sweeping the earth, muttering names the living had long forgotten. Some claimed they heard two voices speaking through him, one of a man and one of a woman, while others swore they saw another shadow walking beside him, though no one was there. The village changed. Huts became houses, markets grew wider. New generations came who no longer believed in spirits, but the graveyard remained untouched. Not even the boldest men dared to build on that land, for everyone knew it belonged to the keeper and the one who ruled him. One day, a group of young men from the city visited Omuif, mocking the old ways. They laughed at the villagers, who warned them not to enter the sacred grove. "Ghosts don't exist," one said, kicking over an offering bowl near the graveyard. The air turned cold, just like it had the night Kola had defied the spirits. Before they could take another step, the baobab leaves rustled without wind, and a voice echoed from nowhere. Old yet powerful, the dead are patient, but they remember. The men fled, leaving their cameras and pride behind, and when they reached the edge of the forest, they saw a figure standing beneath the tree, a tall man in white cloth, his face pale and eyes glowing softly. It was Kola, but he said nothing. He only raised a hand, pointing toward the village, as if warning them to leave. They obeyed without a word. The next morning, when the villagers went to find Kola, they discovered his staff standing upright beside Mama Aduna's grave, its top glowing faintly with embers that did not burn. His body was gone, but his footprints were there, leading into the river and disappearing beneath the water. The elders declared that the spirits had finally released him, and for 3 nights straight the river glowed silver beneath the moon, calm and still as glass. From that time onward, no one dared insult the dead in Omu. The people built a small shrine near the baobab tree, marking it with carved words, "Respect the earth that cradles you, for one day it shall hold you too." Each year, on the night of the full moon, villagers brought offerings of palm oil and white cloth to the shrine, telling their children the story of the arrogant man who became the guardian of the forgotten. They said if you listened closely, you could still hear him humming an old lullaby in the Wind Mama Adonis song echoing through the trees. The new generations called it superstition, but even they avoided the forest after dusk. And whenever a stranger entered the village, laughing at the old beliefs, someone would quietly whisper, "Let him laugh. The keeper always listens." It was said that those who mocked the dead in Omuefe began dreaming of a grave, of a pale hand rising from the earth, of a man and woman standing side by side beneath a silver moon. Whether those dreams were warnings or invitations, no one dared to find out. Thus the curse became legend, and the legend became law. Kola's name was never spoken at the market, but his lesson lived in every heart. The living must respect the dead, for the boundary between both is thinner than breath. And somewhere, deep in the misty forest, when the wind sighs through the baobab leaves, the spirits still whisper, he learned, "So you don't have to."